Crooked cops bribe judge to jail black woman, not knowing she's a U.S. attorney with a revenge. In a city simmering with secrets and whispers of corruption, an unassuming arrest triggers a chain reaction of twisted fate and unimaginable revenge. This is the story of Maya Carter, a brilliant, relentless black attorney whose life is shattered in a single night when crooked cops bribe a judge to lock her away. Unbeknownst to them, Maya is no ordinary defendant. She's a U.S. attorney with a lifetime of victories against injustice, and now she has a personal score to settle. Prepare for explosive confrontations, shocking alliances, and the ultimate reckoning. The stage is set for a battle between power and truth. Maya Carter was no stranger to the complexities of the American justice system. She had lived its triumphs and failures, studied every nuance of precedent and statute. As a lead attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois, her reputation for taking down criminal organizations with lethal precision preceded her. Yet, she never thought she would find herself in the center of a plot so convoluted and personal. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago, Maya had climbed an arduous ladder. She excelled in high school, pushed by her father, a civil rights activist who taught her how systemic injustices often thrived in plain sight. Graduating top of her class from Howard University, then moving on to Harvard Law School, Maya blazed through every barrier in front of her. She took her place in the Justice Department, determined to be a spearhead against political corruption and police misconduct. Her office was a modest corner in the Dirksen Federal Courthouse, a place Maya had always viewed with reverence. The marble corridors and towering pillars symbolized the lofty ideals of fairness and equality under the law. Even so, she knew better than to believe the building's grandeur inherently equaled moral righteousness. Corruption could exist anywhere, festering within individuals who took an oath they never intended to honor. Late one Tuesday evening, Maya stayed behind after most of her colleagues left. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed softly, matching her own hum of excitement as she pored over a complex case file. She had been building a sweeping investigation into allegations of police corruption in one of Chicago's most historically troubled precincts. Officers from the 51st Precinct stood accused of narcotics theft, brutality, and even the disappearance of key evidence in ongoing cases. Rumors suggested the precinct was also involved in something bigger, a tight-knit circle of higher-ups funneling confiscated drugs back into the streets for profit. Maya smelled a conspiracy, and she was determined to uncover its every layer. Yet that night, Maya's instincts warned her something was off. The elevator's ding startled her, echoing unnaturally in the deserted hallway. She glanced at the clock, just past midnight. Another staffer, security, or perhaps someone who knew she was looking too hard into the wrong places. It was only a fleeting thought before she refocused on the file. Nothing felt immediately threatening. She scribbled a few more notes, highlighted a few lines of testimony that needed follow-up. This case was going to be her magnum opus, exposing an entire network of crooked officers. If she succeeded, she would not only deliver justice to many victims, but potentially reshape the very culture of law enforcement in Chicago. If she failed, well, she couldn't afford to fail. Just as she packed up to leave, Maya's phone vibrated. A text from her father flashed on the screen. "Be careful, Maya. I'm proud of you." It was almost as if he sensed the storm before she did. Maya smiled and replied, "I will. Love you." Little did she know, by the time dawn broke, her world would be turned upside down. Early the next morning, Maya pulled into a parking garage near Cook County Jail. She had a meeting scheduled with a confidential informant who claimed to have first-hand knowledge of bribes paid to police officers. The informant also hinted at involvement by a higher authority, a link Maya was determined to substantiate. If the allegations proved true, it would validate Maya's suspicions that the corruption reached more than just a few rogue officers. It could implicate high-ranking officials, possibly even a judge. On her way in, Maya's phone buzzed. Her colleague, Assistant U.S. Attorney Leo Martinez, was calling with an urgent tone. "Maya, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Where are you?" he asked, voice crackling through. I'm about to meet a source near Cook County Jail. You sound tense, Leo. What's going on? You need to watch your back. I've heard chatter about you from some associates at the courthouse. Something about new charges filed, but they wouldn't say more. Maya frowned, her heart beating faster. Charges? Against who? I don't know yet, but Maya, be cautious. She ended the call, feeling unsettled. Maya was aware that when you got close to exposing corruption, those threatened could turn dangerous. Still, she pressed on. The informant was waiting in a small coffee shop across from the jail. Maya entered to find a man in a tattered hoodie, nursing a cup of black coffee. She recognized him from their last clandestine meeting. Darius Rollins, a small-time drug runner turned whistleblower. Darius's eyes darted around the cafe, paranoia etched in every line of his face. You gotta help me. They know I'm talking, he whispered as Maya sat down. Calm down, Darius. Just tell me what you have. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Records, receipts, phone logs, enough to show certain people are getting paid off to lose evidence. You do the math. Maya's pulse quickened. If these documents were as damning as Darius claimed, she had a direct link to implicate not just officers, but possibly even a judge. She carefully placed the envelope into her bag, making sure not to let curiosity overtake caution. Good job, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'll make sure you're protected. Before she could stand, however, 2 uniformed officers walked in. Maya instinctively recognized them from the precinct she was investigating. Their stern expressions locked onto her table. She wanted to believe it was a coincidence, but deep down, she knew better. Maya Carter? One of the officers asked. Yes, officer? Maya responded, keeping her composure. You're under arrest. We have a warrant for your detention. Please stand up and place your hands where we can see them. Stunned, Maya looked at the officer's outstretched handcuffs. What are the charges? She demanded, her voice calm but laced with underlying outrage. Possession of narcotics with intent to distribute, the officer said, his lips curling into a slight smirk. That's ridiculous, Maya hissed. Check my bag if you want. There are no drugs. The second officer unzipped Maya's briefcase with practiced nonchalance. Instead of the envelope Darius had given her, he pulled out a small, clear bag of white powder. Maya's jaw dropped. She realized, with horror, that someone had planted it while she was distracted. Darius looked as shocked as she was, so this was bigger than a single officer or a single moment. The setup had begun. Maya Carter, you have the right to remain silent. The officer's voice droned on as he read her Miranda rights. People in the cafe watched with a mixture of confusion and quiet fascination. Maya's face burned with indignation, but she forced herself to remain stoic. She knew better than to resist, to give them any reason to apply force. As they led her out in handcuffs, Maya couldn't help but feel an unsettling chill. This wasn't just about discrediting her, it was about burying her. She glanced back at Darius, who looked terrified, but she could do nothing for him at this moment. All she could think was, I won't go down without a fight. Behind the tinted windows of a police cruiser, Maya felt her anger rising. She kept silent, though her mind raced with strategies. She was intimately familiar with the criminal justice process, but only as an enforcer of the law, never its victim. Now she was living a terrifying reality. When the cruiser pulled into the station, Maya was unceremoniously marched inside. The fluorescent lights overhead illuminated the faces of smirking officers. Each step, each glance from her captors told her this was a tight-knit operation. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a cold, cramped holding cell. The stench of old sweat and hopelessness clung to the walls. Maya's phone and belongings were confiscated. She felt vulnerable, not just for herself, but for the safety of everyone connected to her investigation. Her personal communications, her laptop, everything was at risk. She had always known that being on the trail of powerful criminals came with risks, but she had never expected to be blindsided to this degree. Hours passed in the holding cell with no explanation. Maya tried to recall every detail of the short time leading up to her arrest. The text from Leo, the meeting with Darius, the police officer's abrupt arrival, and the planted drugs. It all smacked of orchestration. She tapped her foot restlessly against the concrete floor, forcing herself to remain calm. Eventually, the cell door slid open and a uniformed officer gestured for her to follow. She was led down a hallway to a small interrogation room. Inside waited two men she recognized, Detective Roy Hastings and Detective Jeremy Dixon from the 51st Precinct. She had seen them in photos while investigating corruption. They were rumored to be ringleaders. This meeting was no coincidence. Maya took a seat at the lone metal table, her shackled wrists clinking against the surface. Detective Hastings started, "Miss Carter, or should I say counselor, we have reason to believe you've been involved in trafficking narcotics. A search of your belongings turned up a sizable amount of cocaine." She held his gaze. "And why would a U.S. attorney be stupid enough to carry narcotics, Detective Hastings?" He smirked. "You tell us. People do desperate things for money." Dixon leaned in, tapping a pen against the table. "We have eyewitnesses placing you at multiple drug exchanges around the city. Plus, the judge who signed the warrant had enough probable cause to believe you're a flight risk." Maya's eyes narrowed. A judge had already signed a warrant? This was moving faster than any normal case, and with a suspicious air of precision. She needed to keep them talking. "Which judge?" she asked, feigning indifference. "Judge Marcus Lowry," Hastings replied, his satisfaction evident in the slow grin that crossed his face. Maya's stomach tightened. Judge Lowry had a reputation for being extremely tough on crime, handing out maximum sentences for even minor offenses. Rumors swirled that Lowry was partial to bribes. Maya had never found concrete evidence of his corruption, until now. Hastings continued, "You'll be held overnight for arraignment tomorrow. I'd suggest you find yourself a good lawyer, Miss Carter." She leaned forward, shackles rattling. "I am a lawyer, and you two are making the biggest mistake of your careers. I will prove this was a setup." Dixon chuckled. "And how will you do that from behind bars?" Their contempt was evident. To them she was a nuisance, an ambitious attorney who poked her nose where it didn't belong. As they escorted her out, Maya's thoughts turned to the people who could help her. She needed to contact Leo Martinez or her boss at the U.S. Attorney's Office, but with her phone confiscated and the entire operation seemingly compromised, Maya realized she might be on her own for the time being. They led her through a maze of corridors until she arrived at a dingy cell. This wasn't just a holding area anymore. This was a place where detainees often spent days, weeks. The door clanged shut behind her. She was locked in, but her spirit remained fiercely unbroken. As Maya sank onto the narrow cot, she steeled herself. She had faced worse odds in the courtroom. This time, the stakes were life-altering. Not just for her, but for everyone who believed in her mission. She would find a way out. And when she did, she promised herself, the entire house of cards, Judge Lowry, Hastings, Dixon, and everyone else in their crooked circle, would come crashing down. Morning arrived with the echoes of clanging metal doors and the buzz of glaring fluorescent lights. Maya barely slept. Anxiety gnawed at her, but a defiant fire fueled her determination. She was scheduled to appear for arraignment that afternoon. If the system worked the way it was supposed to, the bail hearing would be straightforward. She could leverage her impeccable record and position to walk out. Yet she couldn't shake the fear that something else was in motion. When a guard finally escorted her to the courthouse, Maya felt the stares and whispers from other officers. She held her head high, refusing to be humiliated. She was Maya Carter, one of the top prosecutors in Chicago. This entire situation felt surreal, but she had to treat it with the same gravity she would any high-stakes case. Outside the courtroom, she spotted Leo Martinez pacing anxiously. Dressed in a crisp suit, he rushed over the moment he caught sight of her. "Maya, thank God, are you okay?" he whispered, his face creased with worry. "I've been better," she replied, "but I'm managing. Leo, they planted drugs on me. Someone set me up." He nodded, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. "I've spent the night trying to figure out what's going on. Rumor has it Judge Lowry is involved, and it's not just him. There are bigger names being whispered. A chain of dirty cops and possibly a local politician. Maya frowned. What about our boss, the U.S. Attorney? Has he weighed in? Leo's expression darkened. He's out of town, on a conference. And from what I can gather, his second-in-command is advising we stay out of it. Stay out of it? Maya repeated, feeling her stomach twist. So they're just going to let me rot here? I think they're worried about the political fallout. Lowry has connections. The optics are messy. Before Maya could respond, her name was called. She was ushered into the courtroom, an all too familiar setting, but today she stood in the defendant's place. The presiding judge, to her surprise, was not the usual rotation. Instead, it was Judge Marcus Lowry himself, stepping in for what Maya suspected was a staged performance. She scanned the room. There were a handful of reporters, likely tipped off about the scandalous arrest of a U.S. attorney. The prosecutor for the state, a woman named Marisol Reed, sat with a stoic face, flipping through papers in a file. Maya didn't know Reed well, but had heard she was tenacious. The bail hearing was brief. Lowry's gaze was cold, dispassionate. The prosecutor argued Maya was a flight risk, a high-level attorney with resources and international ties. Maya wanted to laugh. Her only international ties were professional conferences she had attended. Yet the judge appeared to consider it seriously, nodding along. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she laid out her credentials and ties to the community. She had no criminal history. She was an officer of the court. But the moment she locked eyes with Judge Lowry, she sensed a sealed fate. I find the defendant to be a potential risk, he declared, ignoring every logical point she made. Bail is hereby denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. Shock rippled through the courtroom. Leo stood up, outraged. Maya tried to maintain composure. Her mind reeled. Denial of bail in a first-time nonviolent drug charge was practically unheard of, especially with her stature. This was a blatant abuse of judicial power. But that was the point, wasn't it? Lowry was sending a message. Maya Carter was not above his reach. As she was led away in handcuffs, Maya heard murmurs from the gallery. She caught a glimpse of Detective Hastings standing near the door, wearing a smug smile. She realized then that their plan was far more elaborate than she'd initially thought. They had bribed a judge, manipulated evidence, and orchestrated her fall from grace in the public eye. They expected her to capitulate, to accept a plea or to wither away in jail. But they'd made one critical mistake. They had underestimated Maya Carter's resolve. If her superiors wouldn't help, she'd find another way. She'd fight them from inside the system they thought they controlled. And when she was done, Lowry, Hastings, Dixon, every last one, would pay the price. Once Maya was transferred to a detention center, she confronted a grim new reality. Stripped of her professional attire and forced to wear an orange jumpsuit, she felt like a stranger in her own skin. The guards relished every moment of this role reversal, an esteemed U.S. attorney locked behind bars. Whispers trailed her every step. Some inmates recognized her from high-profile cases. Others eyed her with suspicion, uncertain whether she was friend or foe. In a place where trust was currency, Maya had none. Yet Maya was not one to sink into despair. Within hours of her arrival, she tapped into her well-honed instincts, sizing up the environment as if it were a new case to crack. She noticed which guards were indifferent, which ones seemed overly invested in humiliating her, and which inmates had influence. From her years of courtroom battles, she recognized that alliances could emerge in the unlikeliest of places. While awaiting her turn at the mess hall, she felt a slight tug on her sleeve. It was a timid voice from behind, a young woman with tear-stained eyes and a shaky smile. "Hey, Maya Carter, is that really you?" Maya turned, curious. "Yes. They said you were a U.S. attorney," the woman whispered. "I'm Tasha. I used to watch your cases on TV. You got my brother's killer put away for life." Her voice shook with gratitude. "He was a gang member and no one else cared. But you fought for us." Maya felt an unexpected warmth. Even in this dire situation, she found a spark of humanity. "I'm sorry you lost your brother," she said quietly. "I hope that case gave your family some closure." Tasha nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "If there's anything you need, I want to help." That evening, Maya learned that Tasha had some measure of respect among certain detainees, those who despised the street violence that had destroyed their neighborhoods. Tasha whispered warnings to Maya about inmates who might give information to the crooked guards. She pointed out that Maya's situation was already known, and some might want to curry favor by feeding falsehoods about Maya's actions behind bars. In the following days, Maya's presence in the detention center sparked a silent tension. Some inmates were thrilled to see a rich attorney brought down. Others feared Maya because of her connections to law enforcement. But a small group, led by Tasha, seemed surprisingly protective. Their reasons varied. Some had been wrongfully convicted and believed Maya stood for justice. Others simply admired her unyielding spirit. Meanwhile, Maya concocted a plan to gather evidence from behind bars. She needed to reach out to Leo, to Darius, or anyone who could help. Correctional facility phones were monitored. Mail was censored. She had to be clever. She took careful notes, memorizing every suspicious detail and conversation, saving it for the day she could present her case to an honest judge, or to the media. One evening, Tasha approached her in the communal area. "I know a guard, Martha Evans. She's not like the others. She hates the corruption here. Maybe she can pass a message for you." Maya's eyes lit up with cautious hope. "Is she trustworthy?" Tasha nodded. "I think so. But be careful. They're watching you closely." In the gloom of fluorescent lights, Maya recognized this might be her best shot. If she could smuggle a letter or arrange a covert phone call, she could coordinate with Leo to uncover the evidence she needed to expose Lowry and the crooked cops. She was treading on dangerous ground. If the guard turned out to be compromised, Maya's situation would only worsen. Still, Maya reminded herself of one truth. She hadn't spent years dismantling conspiracies just to crumble under pressure now. She was Maya Carter, a woman forged by adversity, driven by an unwavering commitment to justice. If these crooked cops and their bribe judge thought they'd caged her, they were dead wrong. Her fire still burned, and now, with potential allies in the shadows, she was one step closer to reclaiming her life and delivering the retribution they so richly deserved. Days blurred into a routine of head counts, meal lines, and the suffocating monotony of prison life. Despite the oppressive environment, Maya's mind remained as sharp as ever. She spent her time reviewing every angle of her predicament, mentally mapping out connections between the officers, Judge Lowry, and the rumored higher-ups pulling the strings. Meanwhile, Tasha managed to confirm that guard Martha Evans was indeed sympathetic. Evans was an older woman with a professional demeanor, and although she rarely spoke, Maya caught a kindness in her eyes. Late one evening, as Evans supervised Maya cleaning the corridor, she cleared her throat softly. "Miss Carter," Evans began, glancing around to ensure no one else was within earshot. "I hear you might need some help." Maya turned off the mop faucet, studying the guard carefully. "I do, but I don't want to put you in a compromising position." Evans shook her head. "I've worked here too long. I've seen innocent people get swallowed by this place. If you're telling the truth about your situation, and I believe you are, I'll do what I can." "Thank you," Maya said quietly. "If you can help me get a message to someone on the outside, Leo Martinez, an assistant U.S. attorney, I can coordinate how to prove my innocence." Evans nodded. "Write it down. Keep it short. I'll find a way to get it out." Maya felt a surge of relief wash over her. That night she composed a short letter, using coded language so that if it were intercepted, it wouldn't immediately implicate Evans. She wrote that she needed to confirm the file from DR was secure and that she suspected the involvement of ML at the highest level. In Maya's mind, DR was Darius Rollins and ML was Marcus Lowry. Anyone reading it without context might think it was just an administrative inquiry, but Leo would understand. Elsewhere, beyond the prison walls, Detective Hastings and Dixon were reveling in their victory. They boasted among trusted colleagues about having taken down Maya Carter. What they didn't realize was that Maya's investigation wasn't solely reliant on her physical freedom. She had laid the groundwork for months, sharing partial findings with Leo Martinez, who was determined to continue the probe from the outside. Unbeknownst to Maya, Leo had managed to track down Darius Rollins, who had gone underground after Maya's arrest. Darius was terrified, convinced that every move was being watched. Still, he handed Leo another batch of records and phone logs implicating not only local officers, but also pointing a finger at Judge Lowry's bank transactions. Huge sums of money had been routed through shell companies, all traced back to Lowry's personal accounts. Leo marveled at the complexity, realizing that Maya had been on the right track all along. But the deeper Leo dug, the more danger he seemed to invite. One night, he received a cryptic threat. An envelope slid under his apartment door with a single bullet inside. Undeterred, Leo pressed on, albeit with added caution. He knew Maya would do the same for him. Their bond ran deeper than just colleagues. They were two warriors in a crusade against corruption. Meanwhile, Maya continued to navigate the treacherous waters inside. Through hushed conversations and coded notes, she uncovered new details. Officers from the 51st Precinct had systematically framed multiple individuals, pushing through convictions with Lowry's cooperation. The scheme netted them promotions, bribe money, and the sense of untouchability that only entrenched power can breed. When Maya received a secret note back from Leo via guard Evans, she read it feverishly in her cell. The scrawled lines informed her of the progress on the outside. Leo mentioned the shell companies, the bullet threat, and the critical need for Maya's direct testimony. But Maya was trapped, facing a trial date set by a judge who was part of the conspiracy. Maya's heart pounded as she realized the scale of what they were unraveling. The heads of this corrupt hydra were more numerous than she first thought. Yet a new wave of determination washed over her. They wanted her scared and isolated. Instead, she felt fueled by the injustice. She folded the note and tucked it into her jumpsuit, a small spark of hope igniting her eyes. With allies both inside and outside, Maya Carter was not beaten. She was planning her counterattack. Every corrupt official who'd conspired to silence her had just set the stage for a larger, more explosive revelation. And Maya was prepared to make sure they tasted the consequences of their betrayal. Weeks crawled by, and Maya's trial date loomed nearer. Judge Lowry had expedited the process, presumably to keep her from gathering the exculpatory evidence she needed. But Maya and Leo were not idle. Despite her incarceration, Maya prepared her defense meticulously, conferring through coded notes and brief visits with the court-appointed defense attorney, who, fortunately for Maya, seemed willing to let her call the shots. On the day of the preliminary hearing, Maya was escorted back to the familiar corridors of the Dirksen Federal Courthouse. She could feel the adrenaline surging through her. Lowry presided over the hearing, wearing a dispassionate mask of authority. The state's evidence seemed overwhelming on paper. Planted drugs, eyewitness accounts, bank records indicating unusual deposits to Maya's account, which she knew were fabricated. It was a mountain of lies, skillfully orchestrated by the corrupt network. But Maya had a trump card. During cross-examination, her court-appointed attorney called Leo Martinez as a witness. Judge Lowry visibly bristled at the mention of Leo's name. Maya smirked inwardly, recognizing the cracks forming in Lowry's stoic facade. Leo took the stand and, under questioning, began to detail the ongoing investigation into corruption at the 51st Precinct. He spoke carefully, ensuring he remained within the confines of permissible testimony. With each sentence, he painted a picture of Maya's actual role, a prosecutor dedicated to uncovering police misconduct. The pivot came when he revealed he had acquired specific documents from a confidential source, documents Maya had been gathering for months. Lowry's eyes narrowed. "This is irrelevant to the drug charges against Miss Carter," he snapped. Leo responded calmly, "On the contrary, Your Honor, This goes to the heart of why Miss Carter has been framed. These officers had a motive to silence her. Lowry's gavel struck the bench with force. You will confine yourself to relevant testimony or be held in contempt. Tension escalated as whispers spread through the courtroom gallery. Journalists jotted down notes with heightened interest. Leo risked contempt charges, but Maya knew he had to push the envelope to get enough of the truth on the record. In a decisive moment, Maya's attorney presented a motion to compel the discovery of phone records from Detective Hastings and Detective Dixon. Lowry, predictably, moved to block it, claiming it was a fishing expedition. However, Maya had anticipated this. She rose, shackled at the defense table, and politely requested the opportunity to speak. The judge hesitated, but the room's attention was fixed on Maya. Your Honor, she began, carefully measuring her words. As a U.S. attorney with experience in these matters, I'm aware that exculpatory evidence must be disclosed under Brady v. Maryland. To deny me access to these phone records is a violation of due process, especially if they contain communications that could prove I was set up. The mention of a well-known Supreme Court precedent hung in the air. Lowry's jaw tightened. He couldn't outright deny a fundamental principle of law without drawing suspicion. After a tense pause, he relented, albeit begrudgingly, that a limited portion of the phone records might be examined by an independent party to determine their relevance. A flicker of hope rippled through Maya's team. This was the crack they needed, and Maya suspected the phone records would reveal Hastings and Dixon orchestrating the framing. Lowry tried to maintain control, but Maya's defiance was becoming evident to everyone in the courtroom. As the day concluded, Maya was led away, but not before she locked eyes with Lowry. In his steely glare, she read anger and fear, a sure sign that the noose was tightening around his conspiracy. If Maya and Leo could keep exposing the truth, they might force the judiciary and the public to see how deep the corruption ran. Outside, reporters clamored for statements, smelling the scandal of a judge potentially colluding with dirty cops to imprison a federal attorney. A media circus was forming, and that public pressure might be exactly what Maya needed to tip the scales. In the holding area, Maya felt a surge of renewed vigor. The hearing had been a small victory, a pivotal step in turning the tide. She hadn't won her freedom yet, but she had won something just as valuable: momentum. And in a conflict defined by power plays and backroom deals, momentum was everything. Despite the glimmer of progress at the hearing, Maya's nights remained claustrophobic and uncertain within the detention center walls. One evening she was roused from a fitful sleep by loud shouts echoing through the corridor. A scuffle was unfolding. By the time she reached the cell door, Tasha was at the bars, craning her neck to see. Faintly, Maya caught a glimpse of two guards pinning someone to the ground. "What's going on?" Maya whispered. Tasha shook her head, eyes wide. "Not sure. Rumors are that a snitch got cornered." Later, Maya discovered the snitch was rumored to have connections to the 51st Precinct. The exact circumstances were murky, but Maya's gut told her that Hastings and Dixon were tightening their grip, using fear tactics to prevent anyone from corroborating Maya's story. A chilling thought crossed her mind. They wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats, and Maya was the biggest threat of all. As if to confirm her fears, a day later, Maya's cell was tossed. Guards claimed it was a routine search, but they ransacked every corner, flipping her mattress and scattering her few possessions. The coded notes from Leo were discovered and confiscated. Fortunately, Maya had memorized the crucial details. Still, the message was clear. She was being watched. Guard Evans, appearing more anxious than usual, whispered to Maya that tensions were escalating among staff. Some of the dirty guards were pressuring others to spy or even sabotage Maya. Evans feared that if Maya didn't gain her release soon, something worse could happen. Maya appreciated the warning, but realized she was walking a razor's edge. She needed to accelerate her plans. Meanwhile, outside, Leo Martinez was racing against time. He had enlisted the help of a forensic accountant to trace the flow of money to Lowry's accounts. The deeper they dug, the more staggering the sums involved. It wasn't just local officers. It seemed a major narcotics distributor had struck a deal with high-level officials, funneling bribes to ensure their criminal empire remained untouched. Maya's investigation had threatened to expose the entire operation, hence the swift move to silence her. Leo was also in communication with Maya's father, the civil rights activist who had taught her to fight injustice in all its forms. Over coffee in a quiet diner, Leo laid out the evidence they'd gathered so far. The older man listened intently, fists clenching. He promised to rally community leaders, to hold protests and press conferences demanding Maya's release. If the legal system was compromised, public outrage might be their last recourse. But Maya had one more ace up her sleeve. In her original files, she had stashed an audio recording from an internal affairs meeting where Detective Dixon admitted to misconduct in a separate incident. That recording was sealed under a protective order, but Maya suspected a copy still resided on a secure server within the U.S. Attorney's office. If she could authenticate it, it would cast serious doubt on the detective's integrity, further weakening the charges against her. Time was running short, though. The trial was set to begin in just over a week. Lowry would do everything he could to expedite a conviction, ensuring Maya would remain behind bars while the real criminals continued to profit. Maya refused to let that happen. She wasn't simply fighting for her freedom. She was fighting to restore faith in a system that seemed dangerously broken. In a late-night moment of introspection, she recalled her father's mantra. One person can't change the world alone, but they can inspire others to fight alongside them. Maya believed that with every fiber of her being. The more pressure they applied from inside and outside, the more likely the entire web of corruption would unravel. She vowed to herself that she would see this through, no matter the cost. And with that resolve burning bright, Maya closed her eyes, bracing herself for the greatest legal and moral battle of her life. The morning of Maya's trial arrived faster than she'd anticipated. Dressed again in a modest suit provided by her defense attorney, far from the tailored outfits she once wore with pride, she stood outside the courtroom, flanked by armed guards. The tension was palpable, crackling in the air like static before a thunderstorm. Spectators packed the gallery, including journalists, concerned citizens, and even a handful of Maya's fellow prosecutors who dared to show support in a personal capacity. Leo sat in the front row, nodding encouragingly when Maya caught his gaze. Tasha's brother and father were nowhere to be seen. Family members were restricted from traveling far, but Maya guessed her father might be organizing protests or speaking on the courthouse steps. She took solace in imagining him out there, rallying for her cause. Judge Lowry took the bench, his expression grim. The prosecution presented its opening statement, painting Maya as a clandestine participant in a drug ring. Maya's heart pounded with anger at the brazen lies. But she steadied herself. She knew the defense had its own arsenal to unveil. When Maya's attorney rose to present the defense's opening, the tension in the room swelled. He began by stating Maya's impeccable record of service, her deep ties to the community, and her well-documented history of prosecuting cases against corrupt officials. Then he pivoted to the heart of the matter. This case isn't about Miss Carter trafficking drugs, Your Honor. It's about people in power who seek to silence her. A murmur rippled through the gallery, and Judge Lowry's gavel thundered. "Order," he barked. But the seed of doubt was planted, and Maya could see it germinating in the eyes of the jurors. Detectives Hastings and Dixon testified first, coolly recounting their version of events. They claimed they'd received multiple tips about Maya's involvement in narcotics trafficking and had followed standard procedure. Their practiced calm and feigned sincerity might have swayed an uninformed jury. However, Maya's attorney repeatedly challenged the authenticity of their evidence, especially the drugs found in Maya's bag, pointing out chain of custody irregularities. Finally, the moment arrived when the defense submitted the audio recording from the internal affairs meeting. It showed Detective Dixon acknowledging prior misconduct, including the tampering of evidence in unrelated cases. The judge's face darkened. Lowry, aware that this evidence was an unexpected wrench in the prosecution's case, tried to downplay it, but it was too damning. In a risky move, the defense called Maya herself to testify. She rose, approached the stand, and took her oath. She steadied her voice as she recounted her investigation into the 51st Precinct, detailing how she'd come across allegations of bribery and missing evidence. She then described the day of her arrest, pointing out every inconsistency in the officers' stories. "Miss Carter," the prosecutor's voice dripped with skepticism during cross-examination. "Do you have any proof that Judge Lowry was aware of or involved in these alleged acts of corruption?" Maya paused, locking eyes with Lowry. "I received multiple confidential informant statements implicating a high-level official. Wire transfers to offshore accounts bear Judge Lowry's signature. Those documents are still under review, but I'm confident they will reveal the truth." Lowry's gavel slammed again, glaring at Maya as if warning her to tread carefully. Yet the damage was done. The insinuation of direct involvement by the presiding judge left a heavy silence in the courtroom. For the first time, Maya sensed the tide shifting. The prosecution looked rattled. Hastings and Dixon, seated behind them, exchanged anxious glances. By the end of the day's proceedings, Maya was escorted back to the holding area. Though physically restrained, she felt invigorated. The jury had heard enough to question the prosecution's narrative, and the next day of trial would bring even more revelations. Reports of the trial's explosive accusations spread outside, fueling a media frenzy. Protesters gathered, demanding transparency. Word trickled into Maya's cell that her father was at the forefront of these demonstrations, calling on the mayor and federal authorities to step in. All the while, Maya clung to a single thought. They tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was a seed. The chain of corruption was close to snapping. Now it was only a matter of who would move first and how far they'd go to protect themselves. On the second day of trial, Maya awakened to urgent whispers in the detention facility. Tasha slipped her a note through the bars before breakfast. "They're scared. Hastings and Dixon are talking about a plan B." A cold shiver ran down Maya's spine. If these men felt cornered, they might resort to lethal solutions. She had to stay vigilant. That afternoon in court, Maya's defense attorney called a surprise witness, Darius Rollins. Clad in plain clothes and visibly nervous, Darius stepped onto the witness stand. Leo had convinced him that testifying was his best chance at both redemption and protection. Darius explained how he had been involved in small-time narcotics distribution, but turned informant when Hastings and Dixon attempted to strong-arm him. He recounted bribery, forced confessions, and planted evidence as routine tactics. Then he pivoted to the day Maya was arrested. "They told me to show up at that cafe," he said. "And just before Miss Carter arrived, Detective Hastings came over to our table. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd pin multiple charges on me. Then he slipped a bag of cocaine into her briefcase. I saw it with my own eyes." Gasps echoed around the courtroom. The prosecutor attempted to discredit Darius's testimony, highlighting his criminal past. But Maya's defense reminded the jury that his cooperation had led to the exposure of the very conspiracy Maya was investigating. The prosecution's case was unraveling, thread by thread. As the day wore on, Maya felt a stirring in the courtroom. Journalists typed feverishly on their laptops. Photographers snapped pictures. The tension crackled with every new detail revealed. Detective Hastings and Dixon grew visibly agitated, shifting in their seats, whispering to their attorney. Judge Lowry's clenched jaw betrayed his mounting frustration. He tried to maintain a facade of impartiality, but Maya sensed fear. Her words and the evidence from Darius had cornered him like never before. Then came the bombshell. Leo Martinez stood, brandishing freshly obtained bank statements. "Your Honor, we've just received these documents, courtesy of a whistleblower at the Department of Treasury." He handed them to the clerk for distribution. These statements show multiple wire transfers from shell companies linked to known drug cartels into accounts controlled by Judge Marcus Lowry. The amounts total over $2 million in the past year alone. The entire courtroom froze. Lowry paled, his hand shaking as he reviewed the papers. Before he could respond, the prosecutor stammered an objection, but it sounded half-hearted. The evidence was too damning to dismiss. Murmurs erupted among the jurors. Lowry tried to compose himself, but the damage was done. Even the bailiff looked uncertain, torn between duty to the court and the realization that the judge might be a criminal. I need to review the admissibility, Lowry managed, voice strained. Yet it was clear to everyone that the trial's course had changed irreversibly. In fact, the next moment brought an even greater shock. Federal marshals, apparently responding to new orders, entered the courtroom. Two of them approached the bench, and one spoke quietly to Lowry. The judge's face went from pale to ashen as he realized the net had dropped on him. In a moment etched into courtroom legend, the lead marshal cleared his throat and announced, "Under direct orders from the U.S. Department of Justice, Judge Marcus Lowry, you are hereby placed under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and obstruction of justice." Gasp after gasp echoed. Lowry sputtered in indignation, but no one came to his defense. Hastings and Dixon sprang to their feet, only to be intercepted by more marshals. The two detectives were also handcuffed, their frantic shouts drowned by the crowd's uproar. For Maya, the scene unfurled in surreal clarity. The unthinkable had happened. The entire ring was collapsing, right there in the very courtroom they once controlled. Overwhelmed by relief and vindication, Maya locked eyes with Leo. He offered a small, triumphant nod. Justice, for once, had prevailed in dramatic fashion. As the chaos subsided, an interim judge took over proceedings. With Lowry exposed and the detective's testimony declared invalid, the prosecution had no choice but to dismiss the charges against Maya. Cheers erupted among those in the gallery who believed in her innocence. Cameras flashed, capturing Maya's expression, a potent mix of exhaustion, relief, and unwavering resolve. She stepped out of the defendant's box, free at last, escorted not by armed guards but by supportive hands on her shoulders. Maya Carter had weathered the storm, and now she was ready for the next phase, delivering the final blow of justice to every corrupt player who had tried to destroy her. In the days following the trial, the city of Chicago was awash with headlines. Corrupt judge taken down by imprisoned U.S. attorney, police bribery scandal exposed, and Maya Carter freed, vows to continue fight. Journalists camped outside Maya's home, eager for statements. Public outcry soared to new heights, fueling demands for a top-to-bottom review of the justice system. Maya spent her first days of freedom meeting with federal investigators to ensure the thorough dismantling of the criminal network. Judge Lowry faced federal charges, while Hastings and Dixon were booked for conspiracy, tampering with evidence, and perjury. Additional officers in the 51st Precinct were named in indictments, and a sweeping internal affairs probe threatened to topple anyone who dared collude with them. One evening, Maya met Leo and her father at a quiet cafe away from prying cameras. The relief in the air was palpable as they sipped coffee and recounted how events had finally aligned in their favor. "It was that last batch of bank statements that sealed the deal," Leo said, grinning. "We got lucky with that Treasury whistleblower." Maya nodded. "Luck favors the prepared, as they say. Without your persistence, I'd still be rotting in a cell." Maya's father placed his hand over hers. "You've made me so proud, Maya. But you also taught this city a lesson. It can't hide its corruption behind robes and badges." She squeezed his hand, her voice soft with emotion. "I learned from the best, Dad." Despite the elation, Maya couldn't ignore the lingering trauma. The nights in jail, the betrayal by people who had sworn to uphold the law, it weighed heavily on her soul. She found solace in thinking of Tasha and Guard Evans, whose small acts of support had illuminated her darkest days. Maya planned to find a way to repay them, maybe by petitioning for Tasha's case to be reopened if there were grounds to reduce her sentence. As for Evans, Maya intended to ensure her bravery didn't go unnoticed. Soon after, Maya was summoned to a press conference at the Dirksen Federal Courthouse. Flanked by local and national media, Maya stepped up to the podium. Lights flashed, microphones jutted forward. She cleared her throat, scanning the crowd of cameras and faces, a far cry from the last time she was in this building under duress. "Thank you for being here," she began. "A few weeks ago, I was arrested on false charges. Today, we've exposed a major corruption ring involving police officers and a sitting judge. Our work isn't done. We owe it to the city of Chicago, and to every American who believes in justice, to continue rooting out misconduct wherever it hides. I may have survived this ordeal, but there are many who still need their voices heard. Let's make sure we don't stop until the entire system is accountable." Applause thundered, reporters shouting follow-up questions. Maya felt a deep sense of validation, knowing her words resonated beyond mere headlines. Still, she was mindful that public attention could be fickle. Sustained change required sustained effort. As the press conference ended, Maya's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered cautiously, her heart jolting when she recognized the voice on the other end. "Attorney Carter, you don't know me, but I work in the mayor's office. I have some important information to share about our police budget allocations." Maya smiled grimly. The fight was far from over. More cracks were forming in the once impenetrable fortress of corruption. She was ready. She had not just survived the system's attempt to break her. She had emerged stronger, more resolved. And Maya Carter never walked away from a battle for justice. Months later, the aftermath of Maya's trial continued to reverberate. Judge Marcus Lowry and several high-profile officers from the 51st Precinct awaited trial for their crimes. A new wave of reforms swept through Chicago's law enforcement policies, spurred by the public outcry Maya's case had ignited. Congressional hearings beckoned, shining a spotlight on systemic issues of police accountability. Maya found herself busier than ever. She'd been offered a promotion to spearhead a specialized task force against organized police corruption. Though the scars of her wrongful imprisonment ran deep, Maya felt a sense of purpose that surpassed any she'd known before. One crisp autumn day, Maya decided to revisit Cook County Jail, the place that once confined her. She had arranged a meeting with Tasha, who was set to appear before a review board to re-examine her case. Maya walked through the all-too-familiar hallways, ignoring the claustrophobic echoes of her past. This time, she wasn't a prisoner, but a messenger of hope. Tasha stepped into the visitation room, nervously smoothing her hair. When she spotted Maya, a broad smile lit her face. "They're really looking at my case again," Tasha said, voice trembling with excitement. "Thank you for everything." Maya squeezed Tasha's hand through the plexiglass. "You helped me when I was at my lowest. This is the least I can do." Outside, Maya found Guard Evans waiting by the exit, her eyes shining with gratitude. Maya informed her that a formal commendation had been submitted on Evans's behalf, recognizing her integrity. Evans had tears in her eyes as she thanked Maya, who simply replied, "No thank you. You risked a lot to do the right thing." As Maya stepped out into the chilly afternoon, she felt the sun on her face, a symbol of the unbridled freedom she'd nearly lost. She inhaled the air deeply and pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. The city stretched out before her, as complex and conflicted as ever, a place of both heartbreak and hope. The next week, Maya stood in front of cameras once more, this time alongside federal officials who lauded the new anti-corruption measures. During the quanda, a reporter asked a pointed question. "Miss Carter, having faced the dark side of the justice system firsthand, what advice would you give to those who feel betrayed or hopeless?" Maya paused, letting the weight of the question settle. "Never underestimate your own power. The system might be flawed, but we, the people within it, lawyers, judges, officers, citizens, have the capacity to change it. My story is proof that even when you're isolated and targeted, truth can prevail if you keep pushing, keep shining a light on the darkness." Her words were broadcast across the nation, stirring conversations about the role of personal responsibility within institutional systems. From local coffee shops to the halls of Congress, people debated how best to prevent another case like Maya's. Some cynics doubted real change would come, but Maya's very presence, standing as a triumphant survivor, offered a powerful counterpoint. Sitting in her office late one night, Maya gazed at the files stacked on her desk. Her phone buzzed with a new tip about misconduct in another district. Outside, the city glowed under streetlights, the hum of traffic fading into the background. Maya took a deep breath and opened the file. She was Maya Carter, a champion forged in the crucible of injustice, resolved to keep fighting until the scales of justice were balanced. And there you have it, the story of how Maya Carter, a brilliant and relentless U.S. attorney, was wrongfully imprisoned by crooked cops and a corrupted judge, only to rise, expose their crimes, and ignite a movement for true justice. From her harrowing days in jail to the fiery confrontations in the courtroom, Maya's unbreakable spirit shone through, proving that truth can prevail against the might of corruption when courage meets conviction. If this riveting tale kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll help spread awareness of critical issues in our justice system, empowering more people to demand fairness and accountability. Stay tuned for more powerful stories that remind us all, no matter the darkness, a single spark of truth can light the way for us all.